When the new Batman Adventures first aired in 1997, it wasn't just a mere continuation of Batman the Animated Series, despite what Warner Brothers would like you to think. It was never intended to just repeat what had come before. It was more of a reinvention with a sleeker, darker, more stylized world, featuring redesigned characters and more varied tones in their stories. And nowhere is that shift more dramatic than in the fate of Mr. Freeze. After the bittersweet hope of Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero, which ended with Mr. Freeze's wife Nora finally cured but forever out of reach, the creative team had to ask, what's next? The answer is Cold Comfort, a story that turned that hope on its head and set out to redefine what it means to be Mr. Freeze. Now you may find yourself wondering why they felt the need to change him again, given that they had already redefined the character in Heart of Ice. They took the concept of the cold-themed bank robber and turned him into a vengeful zombie snowman who mourned his lost wife. And the answer can be found in Sub-Zero. It's important to note that, while it was set in the same continuity as Batman the Animated Series, Sub-Zero was made by a separate crew, headed by Boyd Kirkland and Randy Rogel. Bruce Timm, who directed Heart of Ice, was not involved, and there was minimal involvement from other key figures like Alan Burnett and Paul Dini. Kirkland was the most prolific director on Batman the Animated Series, and Rogel wrote some of the best episodes like Two-Face and Robin's Reckoning, and they put their own personal stamp on the character. They felt that he should be able to reclaim his humanity and have a chance at happiness. They argued that no one was beyond redemption, and that seems to be the fundamental disagreement that is the root of how Cold Comfort came to be. If you look at his episodes, Heart of Ice and Deep Freeze, it's very clear that Mr. Freeze was a tragic figure who simply couldn't win. His obsessive love for his deceased wife Nora essentially made him irredeemable, because everything he did was for her or her memory. Kirkland and Rogel took a different approach. They took the ambiguous ending of Deep Freeze, where it was implied that Nora would never be revived, but it couldn't be explicitly said because of broadcasting standards of the time, and decided that Freeze should get a happy ending of sorts. They intended for both Nora and Victor Freeze to be cured, with the latter willingly going to prison for his crimes as Mr. Freeze. Kirkland has been very open about this. His original ending was hopeful but not saccharine. A rise after a spectacular fall, which I think tied into his Mormon faith, as I discussed in my earlier video about Sub-Zero. I've included a link to it in the info button in the top right corner, so add that to your watch later list if you haven't seen it already. Both Kirkland and Rogel clearly believe that no one is beyond redemption, that anyone can turn their life around, even a traumatized zombie snowman. While Warner Brothers vetoed that original ending, they did approve the ending we got in the end. Nora cured, and Mr. Freeze wandering the Arctic, ecstatic that his wife survived, even if he'd probably never see her again. And Kirkland clearly felt his choice still honoured the emotional truth of the character. He still suffered loss. But how did the rest of the BTAS creative team react to this pivot? Let's just say that not all of them agreed with that direction. Bruce Timm, for instance, stated that in his view Nora was dead and always had been. Her unjust death was the engine of Freeze's tragedy, and bringing her back to life unravels the psychology of the character that Paul Dini had carefully crafted. As the director of Heart of Ice, he clearly feels a lot of ownership of the character and is rightly proud of his work, and Sub-Zero, you could argue, took his shining award-winning toy and broke it. While Timm is clearly a professional and admired Kirkland and his work, you sometimes get hints of his frustration in interviews. When discussing Sub-Zero, specifically the ending, he describes reviving Nora as weird, and how parts of it made him grind his teeth in frustration. Obviously, I can't speak for Bruce Timm because, shock horror, I'm not him, and I've never even spoken to him directly, but I get the impression that he can be obstinate at times. And that's not a criticism of him, it's just that it appears that he has a very clear idea of what he wants and seems to have very little tolerance for anything else. By reviving Nora, a character that Timm and co had intended to be dead from the offset and more a symbol than an actual character, the possibility of the Freeze family reuniting was now on the table. But the absence of Nora is Freeze's sole motivating factor. If he's not driven to crime by his despair over Nora, what could motivate him? The answer lies in a doodle on a Denny's placemat, of all things. Now, I'm told that the creative team had spent quite some time talking about what to do with Mr. Freeze in the new Batman adventures. He was a valuable character that they didn't want to leave wandering the Arctic tundra, and they saw a return in the new Batman adventures as an opportunity to correct the course. While at lunch at a nearby Denny's one day, art director Glenn Murakami doodled a sketch of Mr. Freeze's head in a jar, a very clear reference to the early days of cryogenics, where deceased ultra-wealthy people were rumoured to be having their heads frozen in the hope that they could be revived one day, but Glenn made one important change. He drew mechanical spider legs on it, and Bruce Timm loved it. As little as I know about Bruce Timm, I know that he loves two things: ladies and monsters. And what's more monstrous than a rotting head in a jar, complete with hideous robot spider legs? It's a development straight out of the EC horror comics of his youth, and was also a callback to Dr. Zinn's robot spy from Johnny Quest, a cartoon that the creative team had loved as children. Essentially, the new Batman adventures brought Mr. Freeze back as a bitter ghost. His body had wasted away and all that was left was his head in a jar. Without his body, he no longer had a heart, symbolising an inability to love. He lost his hands, symbolising his inability to touch and feel. And his severed head symbolises an irreversible detachment from humanity. I also think that it robs him of his dignity, which fuels his vengeful behaviour. It's a strong reaction to the more hopeful ending of Sub-Zero, that's for sure, but it did what they set out to do. It made Mr. Freeze emotionally unreachable, physically broken, defined by loss, and resets him as a cautionary tale about succumbing to despair, rather than a romantic one. Paul Dini, who reinvented Mr. Freeze the first time around, came up with this new characterization too. Without Nora and without his body, he set out to deprive innocent people of whatever they loved. It was his way of sharing his pain and feelings of loss. He wanted other people to feel what he felt, out of spite. He destroyed a rare dinosaur fossil, a painting to celebrate Gotham's tricentennial that had taken years to create, but he tried to kill Alfred, robbing Bruce Wayne of his surrogate father. Anytime there was some sort of joyful celebration, Freeze would turn up to ruin it for people. This was a move that intended to make him an overt villain, stripping him of any sympathy he had. Dini also noted that it broadened the character, making him less predictable and therefore more dangerous. Note that in Heart of Ice, Freeze only targeted GothCorp for their CEO's role in Nora's death. In Deep Freeze, he only cooperated with Grant Walker because he had Nora's body and dangled the possibility of her revival to get Freeze on board with the mad plan to bring about a new Ice Age. And in Sub-Zero, Freeze only kidnapped Barbara Gordon because she had the same rare blood type as Nora. So on paper, it was logical. But feelings and emotions are very rarely logical. I know that the fan reaction was generally negative, and if you couldn't tell, it's not my favourite take on the character either. Having said that, I get the thought process behind it. But what I think they may have failed to take into consideration was the emotional attachment that many viewers have to Mr. Freeze and his sad love story. Now, I don't want to give the impression that the creative team were being spiteful in this take on Freeze either. I don't believe that they were being petty or vindictive. I think it's just a different philosophy. Crucially, they identified his reliance on Nora as a narrative weakness. If they didn't change course, they'd have to contrive a reason to endanger Nora to bring him back, so they needed to uncouple him from her. By having her leave Freeze after he failed to return from the Arctic and having his body degrade, this freed the writers from ever needing to solve the Freeze and Nora relationship again. It's pretty tough to put a man with spider legs back into a love story, although that didn't stop some of the tie-in comics from trying. And in my opinion, this is a direct response to Sub-Zero, and a hard turn away from the optimistic ending. It's abundantly clear to me that Sub-Zero proposes that hope can thaw even the coldest heart, but cold comfort argues the opposite. That some tragedies just bruise too deep, and some people will never recover from them. So I've talked a little bit about the general community sentiment around this episode, which is mostly negative. But what did Randy Rogel and Boyd Kirkland think? In Bob Miller's Batman the Animated Interviews Volume 3, an essential read for superfans of Batman the Animated series I might add, he documents what Kirkland and Rogel had to say about this new take on Mr. Freeze. Kirkland's reaction was very negative, saying Cold Comfort felt like someone's idea of a sick, twisted joke, a poke in the eye of anyone tempted to feel sympathetic for Mr. Freeze. And that's a direct quote, by the way. Although he later softened his tone by saying that the show itself was well made, but not at all what he would have done, echoing Bruce Timm's critique of Sub-Zero. Randy Rogel was far more diplomatic, saying that he preferred Freeze to stay human, stay tragic, but most importantly, stay reachable. He argued that the reason why so many people love the original take on Mr. Freeze was because of his humanity, and if he had had his way, he would have had Mr. Freeze be cured and reunited with Nora one day. So ultimately, looking at Cold Comfort and Subzero, I think it demonstrates two different readings on the same character. Paul Dini and Bruce Timm believed Mr. Freeze was defined by irrevocable loss. Boyd Kirkland and Randy Rogel believed he was defined by the chance of redemption, and that he should get a satisfactory ending with the possibility for him to return later on. Both views are sincere, both lead to powerful stories, and both are indicative of a deep connection to the character and his story, and that is the key thing. Ultimately, the tragedy of Mr. Freeze resonated with viewers because he was a mirror for them, someone open to interpretation. Cold Comfort, meanwhile, forces us to confront tragedy without the comfort of ambiguity. Where Heart of Ice and Deep Freeze let viewers see themselves in Freeze's loss and Subzero offered a thawing of hope, Cold Comfort is absolute. No body, no reunion, no redemption. It strips away that mirror and confronts us with an icy truth that the creative team wanted us to see. Some losses are final, and some hearts, no matter how human, will remain frozen. Okay, that's it for this essay. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really liked the video and feel like tossing a buck or two my way, please consider using the thanks button, because every little helps. And if you have really enjoyed my work, you might want to pick up a copy of my book, Rogues Gallery. It features 22 essays on villains from Batman the Animated Series. There's a beautiful cover by Batman the Animated Series background artist John Calmette, a foreword by director Dan Reber, and a moving segment from the late Kevin Conroy sharing his thoughts on life, love, and loss. Plus, an exclusive essay on the Condiment King that will never be made into a video. Rogues Gallery is available worldwide on Amazon, both digitally and in softcover. Finally, channel memberships are just $1.99 a month and give you early access to my essays, custom emojis, and your name featured on my members end screen, which has been rolling for a little while now. Huge thanks to everyone who's already part of this. You've helped to make these videos possible. If you want to see your name up here too, join the channel now. Next time. When I return on Monday, I'll conclude my series of videos on Mr. Freeze by discussing his one chance at redemption and how it was brutally ripped away from him. It's his final appearance in the DC animated universe, the Batman Beyond episode Meltdown. And then on Friday, I want to mark the new year by talking about the two-part debut of Batman Beyond. You know, new year, new Batman, and how the creative team achieved the impossible, creating a replacement for Batman that the fandom has widely accepted. Hope to see you then.